obviously it's been a busy month for you on top of campaigning, the whole grand jury report. And I did see you, I watched most of you, you had an interview with the Sun Sentinel the other day, and Alan Zeman was there. And they kind of made the headline where you characterized the grand jury report as like something about mean girls or something like that. I think the headline was a little snarky, but you just want to make sure that everyone you do accept that there are some very serious issues that the statewide grand jury we're looking into and we're trying to address. Is that right?
Absolutely. Our bond, and in fact, many of the different topics that were addressed in the grand jury report were important, and there was some valuable information shared in it. Unfortunately, the way that it was shared, there was certainly a maliciousness to it. There was disdain in the language and the way that it was written. Having been an English teacher myself, there's a difference between reporting facts and giving quite a bit of hyperbole and unprofessionalism. So it read more as a political document in my reading of it and in many reading of those who I've spoken with, but it certainly pointed out a lot of things that even myself as a board member have been frustrated with throughout the process and have made many very valuable efforts to be able to address, some of which we have addressed as a board, and I'd be happy to talk about this with you both tonight.
It did come up because there's a lot of undercurrent about you. If you were to win, the argument is that the governor would just remove you and put in his choice. But you told the Sun Sentinel, Steve Bosquet, and Dan Sweeney that you had a different take on that. Tell us what your feeling is about that argument that you'll just be removed by the governor if you win.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So this has come up. There is kind of this rumor mill going around Broward County of, I would be removed once I got reelected. The reality is back in 2019 when the governor originally had his press conference and announced his grand jury, he indicated that at the time, if he felt that he had the authority, he would have actually removed the 5 board members. And instead, he did not feel he had the authority because we had been duly elected and the public had the same information he had, and therefore he was initiating this grand jury so that they would be able to then investigate. And he gave a very specific outline of what he anticipated they would find. Interestingly, it happens to be verbatim what it is that they did report back then in their report. But because he indicated at the time he didn't have the authority, being reelected would actually put me in that same place. I will have been duly elected. The public will have had all of the information that he has at the time in which he made his decision. And then furthermore, he actually also, when it came to Scott Israel, Sheriff Israel, who he had removed in a similar time frame, had also ran for reelection, and he publicly stated that if he had been reelected, he would have remained then in office. He would not have had the authority. Beyond just his own words, there's actually quite a bit of advisories from the Florida Supreme Court to the governor, as well as legal precedent that indicate he would not be in a position. It's not really a gray area. It's fairly black and white. So I'm not concerned about it because he is not in the position to be able to, through his actual authority in his position, based on being then reelected.
Mike, did you have something you wanted to ask first?
Well, so at this point, he has not expressed to you either either publicly or privately that he's going to apply, I guess we'll call it the Scott Israel doctrine to you.
He has not.
He hasn't told you that. Okay.
No, I've not actually had any communication.
Now, are you saying that, just so, because this is new, I hadn't heard it put quite the way you put it. So basically what you're saying is that there's legal precedent why he can't do this. Because all I've heard is that it's really, so to date is I've heard the rumors and I've heard the other side, which is that he wouldn't do it. But so I'm clear, though, I had not heard this until tonight. What you're saying is that this is beyond his personal like or dislike or what he wants to do. He legally can't do it. Is that what you're saying?
he doesn't have the authority to do so. Correct. He doesn't legally have the authority based on what there has been precedent in prior lawsuits, as well as very specific written advisories to the governor on this specific topic over many, many years.
So essentially what it sounds like is that if he found, again, and I'm not saying you did anything wrong, but if he, in his opinion, felt that you did something wrong and he's obviously now suspended you for this term that you're concluding, but if you get a new term, I guess from what it sounds like is that the slate gets wiped clean. If he was to remove you, it would have to be for some transgression that was done during the new term.
Correct. That is how the advisories read. And I mean, I can show you. It wouldn't make very well for a conversation, obviously, on this discussion. But yes, I'd be more than happy to share with you several different cases in which that applies.
No, I get it. I like I said, I find that fascinating because I'd never heard that, but it makes a lot of sense. On another note, as Tom said at the beginning, you know, and again, and I do apologize if you think that I'm coming at you in an unfair way, which I'm not intending to. But so I thought it was interesting because I've heard this rumor since the summer that, and I'm sure you've heard it too. And again, I'm just going to see if you wish to comment on it. You know, Mr. Zeman made a big deal about it when he spoke with me today. But again, I'm not going to make a big deal about it because he had every opportunity to be here and didn't. So I'm not going to, you know, I'm not his advocate. But I do think that it's kind of newsworthy because it's interesting. So my understanding is that you and Mr. Zeman participated in a debate with the League of Women Voters, and the allegation is that there were comments made, I guess it was on Facebook. There was people that were allowed to attend. There were comments made during the debate that intimated that Mr. Zeman's ex-wife was making disparaging comments about him, and the allegation is now that those comments were actually made by your, again, and correct me if I'm wrong, fiance, campaign manager, one in both, that he was involved with it, that he had made comments to third parties that he was going to do this, that apparently they're investigating. Again, I don't know any of this to be true. I'm not speaking to you that I know it to be true. I know that I've heard a lot of a chatter about it in, you know, again, in the political communities of which I run. So I think in fairness to you, I'd like to give you the opportunity to comment on it if you want to comment on it.
I guess I can comment to the extent that so I will tell you this, that I actually don't look at the comments when I'm on the interviews, only because it's more difficult for me to try to stay on point with what's being asked of me by the interviewers. So I don't actually look at the comments. It was shared with me after one of the interviews that there were comments by Mr. Zeman's ex-wife, but I'm not familiar at all with what his, you know, status is with his ex-wife. So I'm not familiar with anything about how that may have occurred.
Are you aware that the League of Women Voters pulled the video? Is that true? Do you know that?
I don't know that either. No, I've not heard that.
Okay, because that's what I don't know it to be true. That's what he alleged, that this was so egregious that the video has been pulled. But again, I don't know. My other question, again, and again, I'm going to end that there because I don't, like I said, I'm not real comfortable. Again, I'm not his advocate. He had every opportunity to be here. He wasn't here. On another note, again, you know, obviously you understand that, you know, we've known each other a long time. I've known you since your first race when I did the Katie Leach race and you were running yourself.
Yeah.
So obviously, You originally, I believe Mr. Bosquet addressed it during your interview with the Sun Sentinel. You know, essentially, and again, I'm paraphrasing, and if I'm wrong, correct me. Essentially, his position was you were once a Republican, you're now a Democrat, you may have even been an independent at one point. That I guess Steve's position was intimating that, you know, when it doesn't go your way, you change parties, you know, you change parties to fit your narrative. I don't know if you, again, it's just something that I hear a lot about out there when people talk about your race, that there's a lot of concerns about the different party changes over the years. I personally, again, I think everybody has the right to do what they want. I don't judge that harshly, but I do think that, because it's something I've heard a lot about, that I think it's a relevant question to ask.
Sure. So I'm very happy to answer it. I don't believe that was actually part of the interview that we had. If it was, I misunderstood Steve's question, which I guess is very possible. But I'm happy to answer the question. So I was initially appointed and was a registered Republican at the time. Throughout my 11 years of service, I did actually change my party affiliation to an NPA. And back in December of this year, I became a Democrat. All of that actually doesn't have to do with my position on the school board. And I say that because in December when I changed to a Democrat, I had no decision. I hadn't contemplated whether or not I'd be running again for office. So it really had nothing to do with there being any opportunity to somehow benefit from my party affiliation. And in fact, when I changed from being a Republican to an NPA, it was specifically so that it was not perceived that I was trying to get some political advantage. My political advantage would have been just to move over from a Republican to a Democrat if I was looking to get just the benefit of being a registered Democrat. But instead, I changed to an NPA because that's what I wanted to run on at the time. And I felt like it was reflective of my service, which was truly about education and not about politics. That's what my campaign is done as I'm running this time. Being a Democrat happens to just be something that is my party affiliation, is not aligned with anything I'm doing. I happen to have, in fact, endorsements kind of across the board. So, and it's something that I've had people from my very earliest, days as a school board member to those that I'm continuing to serve or have continued to serve over the last 11 years.
Let me
Donna, last question from me, just real quick. So I've talked to different people, Democratic leaders, and again, the party has endorsed Mr. Zeman. Presidents like Ms. Fortman and Barbara Essman have been adamant for Mr. Zeman. And one of the things that I've heard from different club presidents was they wanted, they were inclined to support you, especially as a woman, and you did carry a lot of the agenda, Democratic, I guess we could say, agenda that people wanted at the school board, especially in the last year, 2 years over the pandemic. But the problem is that, what they're saying is that when they asked you to participate in their club and come and speak and do that, you never did. That you would not engage in the community, going to the clubs and speaking to them, which is why they and the party they did. And again, I don't know. I have nothing to do with the party. I'm not in the endorsement process. I'm just telling you, again, what I've heard around town. Okay,
well, so that, Mike, I will tell you honestly, that's the first time I've ever heard that, specifically in terms of their endorsement. They did have an endorsement process. I've only heard through the grapevine myself in terms of how that endorsement process went. I have always led as a school board member about students, education, staff, what's in the best interest of Broward County Public Schools. So when it comes to politics, it's never been the thing that I have focused on. And so, if the party, either party, at any point decided they wanted to acknowledge or support or endorse me, that was certainly up to them and their leadership. I continue to stay focused on one message: education. Education over politics, because politics, no matter what your party affiliation is, doesn't speak to how you will be a leader. What speaks to how you will be a leader is how you have actually served over the years. And I've been in service for many more than just 11 years to Broward County's children in education. And so that is what speaks to who I am and how I serve.
Let me just point out for anyone listening about the League of Women Voters video. I was told about it the night it happened, and I tuned in, and there was an account that had a name, the last name of Zeman, and they were saying, intimating that they were an ex-spouse, and asking the moderator to relay questions. And anyone who's watched a video on Facebook, the comments, you have to have them open, and you have to be reading through them, which is kind of hard when you are on camera, because then you're looking down at a different screen, because usually your face is taking up the screen when you're on video. So I don't know if anyone actually saw them other than people who were actively chatting. And I reached out. I clicked the message on the account. It was it seemed to be a very new account. It didn't have a lot of information, had no pictures, and I messaged them to say if they had any comment or if they wanted to provide any more information, that I was a reporter who was covering these kind of races, and I never heard back from them. So, the allegations that Zeman might be making are fine, but I've seen no evidence of it's anybody. It could be any. I mean, the internet, Facebook's full of trolls, so it could be anybody who's just looking to cause trouble. But I don't know. And anyone who's saying there's an investigation, this isn't D.C. and this isn't national politics, so I don't know how far that would go. Let me ask you more about some of the school board stuff.
Sure.
The Promise program, which seems to be really a lightning rod. When the superintendent was there seemed to be a reluctance to admit shortcomings of a program that, and I was there when it was kicked off, and it was everyone in town. It was the sheriff, it was the state attorney, it was the public defender, it was every politician in town was for it. And then after Parkland, they all disappeared, and it became a school board issue and a Runcie issue. Do you think it would have been better for that board and for Runcie just to admit mistakes and try and figure out the best way instead of trying to talk around the issue or try and defend it or say it wasn't applicable?
So, there were so many things looking back. The reality is what happened at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas was tragic. And I know that there are many people who have looked to many different sources to try to find some explanation, something to take away or ameliorate in some way the pain. And I can imagine you're going to look at, what did the Broward County Public School District do or not do? Was there something to point a finger at? And so when you see a program like the Promise program, to look at it and say, well, this must have been the cause, right? But when you look at what happened with specifically with this individual and their interactions with the Promise program, it was really just a misalignment with the fact that there was a connection between the Promise program and what occurred that day. So in terms of how it was handled from a public relations perspective and how it was discussed and, if there was information that was accurate or inaccurate at the time that it was shared, I think as the information has continued to come out and be discussed, it's been fairly clear that there wasn't a connection between the Promise program and what occurred at MSD. There were a lot of things, obviously, that were implications in terms of why that tragedy occurred and what unfolded the day of, and the fact that there were so many lives lost and so many people injured and impacted. But the Promise program and how much discussion there was around it was really one that took off focus of what really were some of those forces that played a role.
Yeah, I feel that, and I wasn't talking to you, but I had spoken with other board members in, I guess it was the election of 2018, and there's still a disconnect. Even till the grand jury report, you had Miss Levinson ranting about it was, certain neighborhoods, certain parents, and it was political. There never seemed to be an attempt to reach out to speak with. And in that 2018 election, there was a lot of anger over those races. And instead of coming together and trying to reach common ground and work together, there would seem to be a adversarial role with parents who had either experienced the worst, and they weren't all Republicans, and they weren't all very political, but they were in pain. And then they had friends of the community who were also angered by and shocked by what happened. And it seemed like the district and some of the board members just wanted to battle instead of trying to come together and work together. Do you think that there was missed opportunities there, or am I misreading the whole thing?
Okay, I think that maybe I'm understanding your question a little bit better. So, Tom, to your point, there's no question the amount of pain, and it wasn't just pain from those families. I can't even begin to fully appreciate the pain that not only did they feel at that time, but they feel today and live with today. But I think, yes, there certainly were additional opportunities that we could have potentially gleaned some ways of working together. I will tell you, and I don't think I've spoken about this publicly before, but I actually invited the families to my home to speak directly with myself and Mr. Runcie, and several of those families actually did come to my home. And so you can imagine that was a challenge. It's not something that I never want to walk away from something that may be difficult if it gives us an opportunity to improve or to do better. And so I did invite them to my home. We had, very passionate discussions and conversations, identified a lot of things that they were looking for, things they needed to express. I think just in the expression alone, it helps in some of the healing process, but certainly doesn't take away the pain. And I think those are opportunities we probably could have done more of at the district level, beyond just what I personally did as a board member. I did take action on several of the things, and their feedback and their thoughts, their insights were very unique to their experience and very helpful for me as a board member to continue to serve after the tragedy, to ensure that we did everything possible, that we avoid anything, not just like that, but similar to where harm can be done to students and staff.
Now, going forward, I don't know if you're even are you following the meetings since you've been off the board, or you campaigning too much, or do you have a take?
I followed some. I'm not listening intently to
what do you
all
think?
of them.
What do you think of what you heard?
I've raised my hand several times. I'd like to make a comment when I was listening. So there are definitely some things that I would be doing differently. I will say that I've been disappointed by the direction. I think that there's a little bit of saying that they have one intent, but then their actions may not follow that necessarily. But it's hard when you first come in as a board member, whether you've been appointed or elected. There's a transition to try to figure out what is your role and how can you best play that role. I do think they are trying to move very quickly, and I think sometimes in the essence of moving that quickly, they may be having some unanticipated consequences. So I hope that they slow down enough to actually understand and appreciate the full levity of each thing that they're doing as they're quickly moving through doing it.
Now, the school board, the grand jury report really talked about safety and then the bond issue. Say you get elected and you're back on the board, how are you going to address those shortcomings in that report to try and build confidence in the voters and the parents and the students, the teachers, that we're not going to have those same problems? We are going to wisely use money to fix real problems and not have this resurface again in another grand jury report.
So I'm very happy that you asked the question, because obviously it's very important to make sure that as you're electing board members, that they're going to be able to continue to bring positive change. a lot of the things that have been identified, and I spent a great deal of my time as a board member frustrated by things that were setbacks, but always exploring and challenging and pushing back on let's figure out why, and then let's figure out how do we change it. So I'll give you a for instance, when staff would come to us and say, okay, well, this was X percent over what the budget is. And I'd say, okay, well, did we sit down and figure out what did we project, where was it over? Okay, is this a systemic issue that you've just identified, or is this specific to this specific project, and how have you been able to identify that? And if it's systemic, what is it that you've put in place to ensure that it doesn't happen again, and that you're looking at the other projects that are actively occurring so that we can try to mitigate them at this point? Those are the types of things that I've actually, as a board member, done, and I think there is an opportunity with some new leadership. I do think that having a chief over our facilities will be able to work more strategically with our program manager, as well as with Atkins, who does basically our price check, right, for an easier sense of what their role is, to be able to really look and say, here is this is what's happening. Here are the reasons why something may either have worked or not worked, and then one of the things that we really have to get a better handle on is where is the district with its processes either slowing down or making something more challenging, whether it's our building standards, whether it's a paperwork process, whether it's not having access to the right people who can make timely decisions. Those are the types of things that I have pushed back and looked for us to be able to say, identify it and then act on it. And having a chief facilities officer, I think we'll be able to make that happen. And so to me, that's going to be a priority one, and having the right facilities officer.
Hey, Donna, real quick, Mike Ahern. So just, again, it's been wonderful listening to you here, and you're so articulate in your position. You know, I got to ask, and it's, we've known each other a long time. Listen, you've got great kids. You got a great family. You got a great career in real estate. You don't need this. You don't need this headache. So if I said to you as someone who's just a person in the community who respects you and likes you and just says, you know what, Donna, why don't you just say, you know what, I've done 12 years. Thanks. It's been a great run. And you know what, but I've made my efforts, and you know what, I'm not always been shown to be appreciative of what I've done, and just say, you know what, move on from it. And again, I don't mean for you to be a quitter. I don't mean that to be negative on you. I mean that to just say, I think you have a good legacy. You've done good things. And, I just think that it's just, I'm just curious what drives you 12 years later to be in this muck and keep going through all this.
So I love that question because it's something I challenge myself with and have over the years, whether or not running for office or serving, because I am passionate about public education. It, to me, is the game changer for community. And I have seen us accomplish so many things over the years that I've been on the board that I know that the challenges and the obstacles and the pushback and some of the negativity, all of it at the end of the day is worth it, because I've been able to affect positive change for kids who I'll never meet. Kids who walked across that stage that I got to shake their hand, and I know that I did something to help them get across that stage. And I try to bring the value of my experience having been in the classroom as a teacher in Broward schools, having graduated from Broward County Public Schools, right? I went to Western. I know what it was like to be on our campuses. 28 years in commercial real estate has brought me a depth of knowledge that I've been able to bring to many different aspects of the board. And then being a mom who still has a child in Broward County Public Schools, too, that had just recently graduated. Those things, I've spent my whole life being a child advocate. This is just another role that I'm doing that. At one point, I was a guardian ad litem. I played a certain role, and I feel really good about having done that, and I look forward to the day I can do it again. Being on boards such as Handy and the Children's Services Council and the Children's Services Board and a founding member of Voices for Children and the United Way as an ambassador. All of those things are opportunities that offer different challenges, but at the same time, they were all rewarding in that I know that I at least played a small role in bringing forward something positive. And that's part of who I am. My mom was a school teacher. My father was a firefighter. They, had roles that gave back to the community, and I grew up with that, and that's just part of who I am.
Thank you.
Yeah, Donna, I want to thank you for joining us. You're going to be on the ballot in about a little more than a month for the school board, and we want to thank you very much for your time and coming on here and answering some of our questions.
No, I greatly appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for letting me go on and on about a couple of the topics. But,
that's great. No, thank you.
Thank you both very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.